Given the amount of issues that we have going on in the world today, it's all too often that I observe people expressing their viewpoints on those issues in a way that turns it into a screaming match by getting really defensive and even aggressive sometimes when somebody doesn't agree with them. And moreover, they use vague generalities rather than specific pointers to what they actually think the problem is, much less how to solve it. And I think that's not only uncivilized, but it's also unproductive, because if I don't know what the problem is, then I can't solve it, right? So on the other hand, if you want to be productive in the way that you argue, if you want to get your point across and actually work towards solving a problem, and most importantly, learn something new by being challenged on your existing viewpoints, then you need to argue the right way. And that entails presenting your argument and then listening for feedback, more or less. So let's talk in detail about both of those, what those processes look like, and what some of the ground rules are. So when you're presenting your argument, I think it makes a lot more sense, at least in my opinion, to articulate what you think the problem is, why you think that's a problem, and don't just stop there, but also suggest what you think the solution is, or multiple solutions, why you think those solutions are effective, and how you propose we implement them. And there are a few ground rules I'd say you have to follow during this process. The first of which is to be specific. So like I said, don't use vague generalities, because if you just say, I'm mad about this concept, and that's it, that's the end of my argument, then nobody can really do anything with that. So be as particular as you can about names, dates, events, statistics, what have you. And if you find that you can't do that, then maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board, do a little bit more research, and readjust. But in the meantime, don't forget to listen to whoever disagrees with you, because they may very well have done more research than you, and they could have some insightful information to offer you that, if you're receptive to, could even change your mind. Rule number 2 is be respectful throughout the process, because like I said a dozen times before, as much as you might want something to be true, and then something comes along and even so much as suggests that it could be untrue, then throwing a fit over that isn't just going to automatically make it true. But more importantly, if you're disrespectful to other people by yelling and screaming at them and being aggressive whenever they disagree with you, or they don't just blindly agree with you, then half the people are going to just walk away from that and refuse to continue engaging with you because, screw you, you're just disrespectful and you don't want to have a healthy debate. But the other half are just going to end up agreeing with you, not because they actually believe in your cause, but because they're afraid of you. And rule number 3 is be open-minded. Be willing to admit that you could be wrong. Because even if you think you've done a ton of research, then there's still a dozen different ways to interpret any information you could possibly come across. There's an infinite number of ways to put it into context and go about that. So don't come into it with the attitude of, I'm just 100% correct, because it's very difficult to be 100% correct about anything. Instead, the attitude should be, this is my opinion, but I could be wrong, and I'm always willing to learn something new, so please educate me. And this is effective for a number of reasons. Because for one, you're putting the other person on the spot, so now they have to defend their argument. And if they can't do that intelligently, then you've kind of already won the argument right then and there, and you don't really have to do any more work. But also, it's effective because you're setting yourself apart from that person. So if they want to continue to take advantage of that and talk down to you and yell at you or something like that, then there might not be any purpose in continuing the conversation with them, but at least the onlookers will see that you have much more credibility because, again, you've set yourself apart from them. So now they will be much more willing to listen to you. So I think a good neutral example of all this would be, say, somebody that has a problem with airport security. So there's a difference between arguing that the right way and the wrong way. So the wrong way would look something like, I'm really angry because I hate airport security, and if you disagree with me, then you're part of the problem. Well, then people would look at that and respond most likely with, okay, I don't really know what the problem is exactly, so I can't help you solve it. Is it that it's ineffective? Is it that the lines are too long? Is it that it's redundant because we have both conveyor belts and metal detectors? So what exactly is the problem? But also, you don't seem like a very reasonable person, so I don't know if an argument with you is really going to accomplish anything. Whereas the right way to argue that would be to go through some of those specifics and to be respectful about it. To say something like, my contention is that I think airport security is somewhat ineffective because the lines are too long and we could use sort of a queue system. Maybe we could have separate lines. Instead of just 1 or 2, we could have 6 where everybody chooses their own lines. And I've just observed this through my personal experience. And I've also seen a study or two that points to the fact that, maybe 20% of all air travelers miss their flights directly due to the fact that they were delayed at airport security. But what do you think about that? What have you observed to be the case, and what do you think the solution is? And now that you've done that, your work is almost complete, but not quite yet, because the next thing you've got to do is actually listen to the other person, what they have to say in response. And there are a few ground rules here as well. For one, don't interrupt, because if you're doing that, then that shows that you're just jumping to conclusions about what they're trying to say, and you care more about winning the argument than actually uncovering the truth or arriving at a solution. But also, take what they have to say seriously. Instead of just dismissing it because it's different from your viewpoint, put yourself in their position. If you had actually done the research that they did, or you had the same experiences as them, would you possibly even believe the same things as them? It could very well be a reasonable position to take. And if you can prove them wrong, then you just go back to the beginning of the process, where you articulate what you think the problem is with their argument. You factor that into your response. Why is that a problem? How do we solve it? And why and how? And if it turns out that they are correct, then you've been proven wrong, but that's good news because you've learned something new, and that's something you should have been receptive to the entire time anyway. So going back to the original example, they could come back with, well, I saw an article that said that multiple short lines is not really that much faster than a few long lines. And so you think about that for a second, and maybe you realize that there is some validity to that if you're talking about a situation like a line at a fast food restaurant or a concert or something like that. But then you realize that at the airport it's a little bit different because people have bags. Some people have more bags than others. Some people are wearing jackets and some people aren't. So now you factor in what they said to your response, and you could counter with something like, well, what if we redistribute the lines? What if we have some where some people have all the bags, some where people have just carry-ons, or some kind of an even distribution? So again, you present your argument in a respectful and open-minded, specific way. You listen for their response, and the process continues. So the next time you want to express an opinion or somehow argue with somebody to get a point across, then try doing it the right way instead of the wrong way. And you'll find that more than likely you'll get much better results than if you just yell and scream at somebody. So this helps, and I'll see you in the next video.